We don't have a daughter. That's what my father said as he slammed the door in my face on Thanksgiving. Hi, I'm Rachel. I brought the turkey, the wine, and 6 years of mortgage payments. And they erased me like I never existed. What came next, I uncovered secrets deep, deliberate, and criminal. The same people I once called family had been using me, not just emotionally, but financially. And when I finally said enough, they weren't ready for what happened next. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who raised you? Tell me, what would you have done if your parents said you were no longer their child? I parked at the curb, my tires crunching softly over brittle leaves that had drifted down like memories. The house looked exactly the same: white shutters, brick walkway wreath with gold ribbon on the door, but something about it felt unfamiliar, like I'd taken a wrong turn into a set piece from someone else's life. The air was sharp with that late November bite, and in the back seat, the gourmet turkey I'd picked up from the Goldfinch Market still radiated gentle warmth through the foil. For a moment, I just sat there. The engine hummed. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady, rehearsed. This wasn't unusual. I'd always been the one to show up early, arms full, heart full, wanting to believe that giving enough could make everything feel whole again. I stepped out, heels clicking on the path Dad had repaved last year, supposedly because the old bricks were uneven. I remember tripping on those bricks when I was 8, skinning my knee. He carried me inside that day, whispering, "You're tougher than that, Rach." That same path now led me to a door that no longer felt like mine. The door opened just as I reached for the bell. Ethan stood there, leaning casually against the frame, a half-eaten dinner roll in one hand, and my old house key dangling from his belt loop like a trophy. "Oh," he said, eyes flicking down to the turkey. "You actually came. Happy Thanksgiving," I offered, trying to steady my voice. "Where should I put this?" He didn't answer. From inside, I heard laughter. Mom's voice, unmistakable, full of warmth that somehow never seemed to reach me anymore. Then Dad appeared behind him. He didn't step outside. Just stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Dad," I said a little lighter than I meant to. He didn't smile. "We don't have a daughter," he said, like he was reciting a line from a movie he didn't particularly enjoy. And then the door shut. Not slammed, not yanked, just a firm final click. I stood there for several seconds, blinking at the brass handle still warm under my fingertips. The smell of cranberry sauce floated through the door seams, mixed with the sharpness of rosemary, and something else I couldn't place, maybe betrayal. Back in my car, I set the turkey on the passenger seat. It slumped slightly, its packaging crinkling like a sigh. My breath clouded up the windshield as I sat there, hands on my lap. The warmth in my chest from a minute ago had vanished, replaced by something heavy and slow-moving. I pulled out my phone more from habit than decision. The screen lit up with the same scheduled transfers I'd been making for years: $3,000 for the mortgage, $2,000 for their monthly expenses, $1,000 for Ethan's car loan, $500 for insurance. My thumb hovered over the cancel button. All the logic in the world couldn't quite overpower that old reflex. Be the good daughter, hold things together, pay the bill even if no one says thank you. But logic was starting to lose its case. I stared at the house. The porch lights glowed soft and golden. I used to sit there on summer nights shelling peas with Mom or sipping cocoa in December while Dad strung the lights. One year, Ethan had gotten so excited about the snowfall that he ran outside barefoot. I wrapped a towel around him before Mom even noticed. Now he jingled my old keys in my face. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I was blank. As if the erasure of me had happened in stages, and I'd only now noticed that I'd been fading. A tap on the driver's window made me jump. I rolled it down. Mrs. Hastings from next door stood there in her cranberry cardigan, her face tight with concern. She had a foil-covered dish in one hand, green bean casserole if I had to guess. That had been her signature for every holiday for as long as I could remember. "Rachel, honey," she said softly. I heard raised voices. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, managing a small smile. "Just a misunderstanding." Her eyes scanned the turkey, the look on my face, the shut front door. "They've been planning this for weeks," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I heard them talking about closing things out, about a fresh start without obligations. My smile cracked. Obligations, I repeated. She set the casserole on the hood of my car, free hand gently covering mine through the window. I don't know what they think they're doing, Rachel, but I want you to know I see you, and I'm sorry. I nodded once, afraid if I spoke, the silence I'd held onto would shatter. She gave me a final squeeze and walked away slowly, the wind tugging at her cardigan. The turkey was still warm, but Thanksgiving, as I had known, it was already cold. Back in my apartment, the city outside hummed with the hollow quiet that only Thanksgiving night in downtown Chicago could bring. Even the usual rhythm of passing traffic seemed softened, muted by the fog of leftover stuffing and family rituals happening everywhere else, everywhere but here. I kicked off my shoes and slid the turkey into the fridge untouched. My hands moved mechanically, muscle memory taking over where thought had stopped. But the weight hadn't lifted. It had shifted, settled somewhere deeper in that space where shock gave way to reason. I pulled out my laptop, sat cross-legged on the rug in my living room, and opened the folder labeled Family. It had started years ago as a convenience automated spreadsheets notes on their utility bills, PDFs of insurance statements. That folder had felt like a gesture of care. Now it felt like a crime scene. The first thing I noticed was the pattern. Each time I deposited funds, especially the larger ones like the $45,000 for Mom's surgery last spring, there followed a trail of large withdrawals, never itemized, never explained. The amounts were just close enough to be plausible, just vague enough to slip past suspicion. Until now. There were charges from Cartier Tesla and a wine club in Napa Valley. A series of high-end restaurant tabs, some going back 2 years. I clicked open a statement from August, a down payment of $160,000 for a lakefront property outside Kalamazoo, Michigan, registered under Ethan Moore. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just that the property wasn't in my name. It was that I had unknowingly paid for it. The money had moved from my deposits into our parents' joint account, then transferred again under obscure labels, House Fund, Medical Contingency, Emergency, Hold. I had written every check, believing I was buying peace, not property. My phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Hastings. Photo, attachment, caption, just us. No outsiders. Happy Thanksgiving from the lake. There they were, Mom, Dad, Ethan, huddled together in matching flannel by a roaring stone fireplace. In front of them sat a golden turkey, the same one I'd ordered from Goldfinch every year. I zoomed in. The cranberry sauce was Mom's homemade recipe, garnished with orange zest and a cinnamon stick. So much for the misunderstanding. I clicked over to my voicemail. My mother's voice greeted me soft and tearful. "Sweetheart, we really need your help. Your father's out of work again, and the medical bills just keep piling up. Ethan's struggling too. Just anything you can spare this month, it would mean the world." Another message 2 months earlier. "Rachel, it's Mom. The surgery estimate came in. They said insurance won't cover half of it. I don't know what we'll do. Can you help? Please don't tell your father I called you like this." I stared at the waveform of her voice now, just shapes on a screen. That same voice had soothed me through scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. Now it played like a tape in an investigation, evidence of manipulation buried in emotional appeal. I reached for my phone again, but this time I wasn't looking for messages. I was scrolling to David Kim. David had been a colleague at Morgan Stanley before branching out into forensic consulting. We weren't close, not socially, but I trusted him. He was thorough, clinical, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. I typed David. "I need to trace about $200,000 in suspect transactions. Family related. You in?" A pause. Then a reply. "Send me what you've got. But if it's family, be ready for it to get ugly." I didn't hesitate. I forwarded everything, the PDFs, the voicemail transcripts, the transfer logs, the real estate documents. It wasn't even 10 minutes later when his name lit up my screen again. "Meet me tomorrow. This goes deeper than I thought." I locked my phone and leaned back against the couch. The room was dark now, lit only by the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. I hadn't noticed how cold the hardwood felt beneath me until then. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, faintly swallowed by the silence of the holiday. I'd spent the last several years wiring my love through monthly transfers, packaging it in digits and decimals, telling myself that duty could stand in for affection. But numbers don't lie. People do. I closed the laptop, slowly exhaling into the dimness. The ache in my chest hadn't dulled, but it had changed shape no longer, the sting of rejection but the burn of betrayal. There's a difference. The elevator hummed as it climbed toward the 39th floor, carrying me higher into the sleek sterility of downtown Chicago's financial core. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored doors, creased forehead, lips pressed into something halfway between resolve and restraint. Somewhere between betrayal and criminal conspiracy, I had just found my place. David Kim's office was a glass and steel contrast to the warmth I used to associate with family gatherings. A coffee pot burbled quietly in the corner, and 3 monitors illuminated his desk like a command center. He didn't rise when I entered. He just pointed to a chair and said, "You're going to want to sit down." I did. He swiveled one monitor toward me. The screen displayed a web of transactions, blue lines for deposits, red for withdrawals, yellow for transfers between domestic and offshore accounts. This, he said, is a laundering structure. And it's sophisticated. I tried to focus on the lines, the dates, the numbers, but they blurred together like memories I'd rather forget. David continued clicking through windows like he was flipping through chapters in a dark novel. They've funneled over $2 million through these accounts in the past 18 months. Your deposits, monthly predictable, acted as clean cover. But the red flags are obvious now. Transfers to shell charities, fake invoices to car wholesalers in Eastern Europe. One in particular caught my eye. Rossi Vehicle Exports based out of Cyprus. Rossi, I echoed the name, crawling up my spine. He nodded. Yeah. And your brother Ethan? He's the primary link between those funds and the dealership. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me. So I wasn't just paying the bills. I was laundering their money without knowing it. David didn't answer. He didn't need to. He pulled up a new document. This is the trust agreement your father submitted 2 years ago. Notice the beneficiary line. It read, Ethan Moore. My stomach twisted. I thought that trust was void. I was told Grandma Helen didn't leave anything behind. David clicked again, revealing the document's metadata. This was edited 3 days after she passed. Track changes hidden but recoverable. Original name listed here. He zoomed in. Rachel Moore. I said nothing. I was no stranger to asset transfers or inheritance disputes. I'd mediated dozens. But this was personal erasure. Legal manipulation with emotional fingerprints all over it. Where did you find this? I finally asked. Buried in a mirrored folder on your dad's cloud backup. And something else. He handed me a printed letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted cursive strong loops my grandmother's. My dearest Rachel, I'm leaving you everything because you've always been the one who saw beyond appearances. Your brother means well, but you carry something rarer integrity. Use what I've left you to live freely. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are, not even family. Especially not family. I read the letter twice before lowering it to my lap. My eyes didn't water, but my throat ached with a pressure I couldn't name. Grandma Helen had always pulled me aside after dinners, slipping me chocolates, telling me stories that weren't meant for the others. I used to think it was just affection. I never imagined it was trust. And now I understood why Mom never let me near the legal paperwork after she passed. Why Dad had dismissed my questions with lines like, "It was Grandma's decision." You need to accept that. Accept it. That had been the mantra for years. Accept the silence. Accept the imbalance. Accept the fact that my name was never printed on a single thing that mattered. Not anymore. David looked at me carefully. What do you want to do with this? I stood slower than I expected. My knees felt strange, like I'd been holding tension there without realizing it. I walked to the window, looking down at the city grid below, structured lit pulsing, with decisions made behind glass walls like this one. I want to do what's right, I said. Not just for me, but because if they've done this to me, who knows who else they've used. I turned back to his desk and picked up the phone. This is Rachel Moore, I told the voice on the other end. I'd like to report a financial crime against my own family. The last time I saw the lake, I was 15, and my dad had just taught Ethan how to skip stones. We'd borrowed a rustic cabin in Michigan for Thanksgiving that year, all pine wood paneling and patchy Wi-Fi. At the time, Dad had clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Someday we'll have one of our own." I believed him. I always did. Now they had one. And I wasn't invited. The conference room at the FBI field office felt colder than it needed to be. Agent Sarah Torres sat across from me, flanked by Monica Alvarez, my attorney, who had been thumbing through a yellow folder of printed statements like she was preparing for battle. Torres had the kind of calm that wasn't soft-measured exact, like a surgeon deciding where to cut. "Ms. Moore," she began, "can you walk me through how you came to access this information? I had rehearsed this. I've been managing my parents' accounts for 6 years. I set up the transfers myself, and they voluntarily gave me access. What I didn't know until 2 nights ago was how those funds were being moved, laundered through a series of shell accounts and property purchases, including a house in Ethan Moore's name paid for by my deposits." Torres clicked her pen but said nothing. I continued. "There's also a forged trust document. The metadata shows my name was replaced with my brother's days after my grandmother died. The original letter, which I recovered, indicates she intended to leave everything to me." I slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, forensic traces. David Kim had mapped out audio files from Mrs. Hastings and the scanned handwritten letter from Grandma Helen. Atop the stack sat a still image from the neighbor's camera. My parents and Ethan on the porch glasses raised the caption on the video reading, "Finally free of her." Torres reviewed it quietly. Then she said, "Your brother's car dealership is already on our radar. We've linked it to a Vincent Rossi flagged in a prior international investigation into vehicle export fraud. If your evidence lines up, it connects multiple crimes. But you need to understand this won't be a private matter for long. When we move, it will be federal. I understand," I said. And I meant it. I was done pretending this was about family drama. That night, back at my new apartment in Wicker Park, I sat on the couch in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, staring at my phone screen like it might blink first. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was clinging to old wallpaper memories. This place was mine. Until the call came. "Ms. Moore, this is building security. Your brother was here. Said he needed to speak with you urgently. We denied entry as you instructed." I stood up too fast, the phone nearly slipping from my hand. "Did he say anything else?" "Just that you were making a mistake. That you'd regret not hearing him out." I hung up and immediately dialed Monica. 20 minutes later, Agent Torres had a protective surveillance unit posted outside my building. "We've seen it before," she said over the phone. When someone realizes they're losing control, they lash out. Financial predators become emotional ones. You need to be cautious. Cautious. I laughed, not bitterly, just tired. I used to think if I kept paying their bills, I'd never have to be afraid of them. Turns out, I was funding the danger. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mrs. Hastings. Video file. Porch cam /Thanksgiving Eve, MP4. I clicked play. The angle was low and angled toward the Moore front steps. The porch light was on. My parents stood with Ethan laughing as they toasted something in plastic cups. "Did you see her face?" Ethan chuckled. She still thought we wanted her cranberry sauce. Mom laughed harder than I'd heard her in years. "It took forever, but we finally did it. She'll stop sending money soon enough, but at least now she knows where she stands." Gregory's voice was gravelly. "She'll cave eventually. She always does. Or Rossi will scare her straight. Rossi." There it was again. The video ended. My thumb trembled as I hit save. 10 minutes later, a new message lit up my phone. "Unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your spotlight. It's over now. No name. Just the words." Monica insisted I forward the message to Torres immediately. A few minutes later, the agent called me herself. "We've confirmed your family is in contact with Vincent Rossi," she said, her voice tight. "We can't wait any longer. We're moving. Raids begin tomorrow morning." I said nothing. Not because I was speechless, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt something steady settle in my chest, not peace, not victory, readiness. They always told me not to tattle. Nobody likes a little girl who tells on people, Mom used to say, brushing tangles out of my hair with a bit too much force. But today, I was telling everything, to federal agents, on live record. The sun was just rising when the messages started pinging. 6:02 a.m., FBI entered dealership. Ethan was on site. Detained without incident. 6:15 a.m., more residents. Gregory and Linda attempting to access upstairs storage, both in custody. I was sitting in Monica's office downtown, my coffee untouched, the silence between us, filled only by the buzzing of her second phone and the faint scratch of her pen as she jotted notes. Outside the window, the city carried on as if nothing had changed. Commuters' buses, cold air curling off the river, but everything in me felt on edge. At 6:34, a final message came through from Agent Torres' found recorder in closet. Full audio match. They confessed. You were right. My shoulders dropped. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath since last night. The recorder was one I'd hidden years ago as a teenager, tucked behind a panel in the closet floor of my old bedroom, back when I still thought secrets were interesting and not deadly. I'd forgotten all about it until Hastings' footage jogged my memory. Just 2 weeks ago, during a quick visit under the guise of delivering documents, I'd slipped a new memory card inside and left it running. Turns out they never thought to look down there. Monica turned to me, eyes sharp but soft. This is it, Rachel. They're naming names. Rossi, offshore wire fraud, attempted beneficiary falsification. They won't wiggle out of this. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted a clean, cinematic sense of justice served, but all I felt was tired. At 8:17 a.m., the news broke. Federal agents raided multiple properties linked to the Moore family early this morning. Sources confirm allegations of financial fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit forgery. Ethan Moore, owner of Moore Imports, and his parents, Gregory and Linda Moore, were taken into custody pending federal charges. My phone lit up with calls and messages. Former coworkers, distant cousins, a high school friend I hadn't heard from in 10 years. You okay? Wait, your family. I always thought Ethan was shady. I turned the phone face down. By noon, Monica and I were walking into the federal courthouse. Reporters clustered along the sidewalk, microphones raised like spears. I kept my head down. Inside the walls echoed too much. A different kind of silence than I'd known growing up, not the passive-aggressive kind, filled with side eyes and tight-lipped sighs, but a sterile procedural hush. Justice's waiting room. When they led Ethan into the courtroom in cuffs, he looked everywhere but at me. His shoulders hunched, not from shame, but strategy. He still thought there was a way out. Gregory followed face blank, unmoved. He'd worn that same expression when I showed him my first paycheck, when I asked if he'd come to my college graduation. A quiet, non-response dressed in a man's skin. Then came Linda. She looked smaller than I remembered, her blazer too big, her hair flattened by the rain outside. She saw me. Her lips parted. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," but her eyes didn't hold it. I didn't respond. Just kept looking straight ahead past the judge's bench, past the prosecution table, as if through the walls themselves. The judge read the list of charges slow and deliberate. Monica leaned toward me and whispered, "This is just the beginning, but it's already enough." Afterward, I stepped outside into the blinding light of early afternoon. Reporters surged forward, but security blocked them. I wasn't interested in headlines. I'd lived the story already. That evening, alone in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table folding laundry. It was mundane domestic grounding. One towel, one t-shirt, one pair of socks. I needed the rhythm. I needed something I could finish. The letter came just after sunset. Pale envelope. Familiar handwriting. Return address, Federal Detention Center, Chicago. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The weight of it was enough. I walked to the shredder, slid it through, and listened as it was ground into unreadable strips. They used to tell me that blood was thicker than water. What they didn't say was that it's also stickier, messier to clean once it spills. But sometimes justice doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic music. Sometimes it's just a slow breath in a quiet room, the sound of truth finally being louder than memory. They said they didn't have a daughter, and for a while I believed them. I wore that silence like a second skin tough enough to survive in, thin enough to feel everything underneath. Now I stood at the stove in my apartment overlooking the Thames, basting a turkey that wasn't pre-ordered or guilt-marinated. This one was mine, roasted with rosemary, garlic, and butter. The kind of bird cooked not out of obligation, but intention. The windows were fogged from the warmth of the oven, and outside London was drenched in late autumn gold. A year had passed since that Thanksgiving. A year since the door shut in my face. A knock came, not a metaphor this time, just knuckles on wood. Mrs. Hastings beamed as I opened the door, arms already outstretched. Her hair was a little grayer, her sweater still cranberry-colored. I packed 2 scarves and a sense of adventure, she said. Turns out Heathrow is easier than the Chicago Expressway. Behind her, Monica arrived with Wine David with a pecan pie still warm from his hotel kitchen. Agent Torres was last slipping in quietly with a bouquet of sunflowers. We gathered in the small living room, mismatched chairs tucked close together, the table covered in a patchwork of plates and candles. Laughter filled the space like something holy. Between bites of stuffing and sips of wine, Monica raised her glass. To Rachel, she said, "For proving that resilience has better taste than revenge." "No," I corrected, gently standing to refill her glass. "To chosen family, and to closed doors that lead to better ones." They clinked their glasses, and I watched the candlelight dance in their eyes. Later, after dishes had been cleared and stories traded, I stepped onto the balcony with a cup of coffee. The river moved slow and steady below, carrying light and reflection in equal measure. London had been more than a relocation. It had been a reclamation. Earlier that week, the final confirmation had arrived that trust was mine again, restored with interest. Grandma Helen's intention had survived the storm. So had I. My phone buzzed softly on the railing beside me. News alert. Vincent Rossi pleads guilty. Case closed. No fanfare, just 4 words and a quiet full stop. I closed the screen and looked out over the lights dotting the embankment, feeling the weight of something. Not gone, but transformed. They had tried to erase me. All they did was free me. Thanksgiving didn't have the familiar setting or familiar voices, but for me the new table was filled with what had been lacking in the past years. Truth, appreciation, and people who were willing to stay. Sometimes family isn't where we were born, but the people who choose to stand by us when everything falls apart. I learned that love isn't about being silent and patient, but about daring to set boundaries to protect yourself. Forgiveness doesn't always mean going back, but sometimes it means learning to move on lighter and freer. In life, there are doors that, when closed, are opportunities for us to find our true path. If this story reminds you of someone or something in the past, please share your thoughts. Who knows, on a quiet afternoon like today, your words will become a light for someone in need.